The army came to Woolwich originally because of the guns. Guns being cast and proved behind these solid walls of the Royal Arsenal. The walls cut off the riverside areas from the civilian town of Woolwich, which lies between the arsenal down here and the army up on the common, its people serving both masters and finding employment with both army and arsenal. The arsenal grew from gun testing on scrubbly marshy land near the old dockyard and grew into a vast, heavily guarded fortress for the production of the weapons of war. Inside at last. A pass is still required, but there doesn't seem to be quite the same air of secrecy as when this was the Royal Ordnance Factory. Most of its 1,200 acres have been sold off to the GLC for its Thamesmead and industrial projects, but Royal Arsenal East and Royal Arsenal West remain in government use and continue to provide some employment, at least, for the people of Woolwich and South East London. One very important activity, which is a direct link with the proving of ordnance that once took place here, is the quality testing for the Ministry of Defence of all types of fighting vehicles, plant, bridging structures and mechanical equipment. This army vehicle is being reassembled after a series of rigorous and sophisticated tests in a completely up-to-date workshop. What's going on here, Mr. Little? You're in charge of this lot.
Well, we take engines from production lines, any engine that's being manufactured for the Ministry of Defence. It is subjected to a 100 hours test, 10 hours a day for 10 days, to prove the specification, and after which we strip it out, lay it out, and measure it all up and examine it for defects. A report is produced, and the manufacturers are invited to come along and see the bits and pieces while it's laid out.
These gentlemen here, what exactly are they doing with this engine?
They're measuring the line of the block in which the liners go. Yeah. And the liners have been pulled out and are being measured, and now they're making sure that all the places that the liners touch on the way down are all parallel and within the dimensions on the drawing.
There'd been a royal dockyard at Woolwich since Tudor times, and over the years rope yards, storehouses and armories were established to service and repair the ships. The marshy land adjoining, called the Warren, was used for the testing of ships' cannon. In 1696, a royal laboratory was set up for the manufacture of ammunition, fuses and gunpowder, and the work was extended until there was a small but efficient industry here. At this time, cannon were being cast near the Tower of London, but after an accident there, it was decided to build a brass foundry in the Warren at Woolwich. The present director of Arsenal West, Brigadier Charles Maple, is most anxious to preserve this building. Brigadier, tell me about this building. What's so unique about it, and why is it you want to preserve it?
Well, it is the original brass foundry that was built here in 1717, and one of the original buildings of the old Woolwich Warren. It was, in fact, built and finished in 1717, and is attributed to Vanbrugh. We think this is probably so. In here, of course, all bronze cannon, like these in front of us, were cast right up until the start of the First World War. And it always gives me some pleasure to stand in this building and think that this is where all the cannon that fought British wars in these centuries were made. A great sense of history.
Well, Brigadier, tell me about this gun that we've got here.
Well, this is a 12-pounder of about 1850. You will see from the crest on the forward part of the chase that the Marquess of Anglesey was the Master General of the Ordnance.
Yeah.
You can see his crest there. And normally, on a gun like this incidentally was cast in here, as you can see, cast in 1850 in Woolwich. Normally, there would be another crest on there of the actual founder. But with this gun, we're not quite sure who the master founder was at that time. It could have been during a period between a man called King and another one called Eccles, but so far we haven't traced the full history of it. But certainly this gun was cast here.
We hope that Brigadier Maple will find a good tenant for the brass foundry. It's a building which would interest industrial archaeologists. Inside, it still looks much as it did when George III came here to watch the casting of cannon and mortar. Apparently, he thought the Warren was not sufficiently belligerent or impressive a title for the site, and hereafter it was called the Royal Arsenal. Another interesting building here, also designed by Vanbrugh, is Tower House, now used as the Arsenal Mess. It was, in fact, a rebuilding of the oldest site in the Warren, and is seen here before the old tower was pulled down. It became a military academy for the officer cadets of the first permanent companies of artillery. And so, for some years, guns and gunners were together. The chief organising officer was Colonel Beauregard, who is therefore remembered as the founder of the Royal Artillery. His officer cadets lived in barracks on the townward side of the Warren until, as we've seen, the new military academy was built for them up on the common. For, as weapons of war grew more formidable, the Royal Arsenal was extended. Convicts laboured to drain the marshes, cut canals, and strengthen the riverfront. Gun batteries were built, and, of course, the great encircling wall. At the end of the day, the convicts were rowed out to their prison hulks moored in the river. Throughout the 19th century and into the First World War, the production of arms and ammunition increased. The arsenal became a great industrial area, producing ever heavier armaments, fearsome weapons of war with affectionate names like the Woolwich Infant.
Brigadier, can you tell me about this massive great mortar?
Yes, well, this was conceived in about 1856 by Robert Mallet, who was a civilian engineer. And he tried hard to sell his ideas to the War Office of the day without much joy. But eventually, after the intercession of the Prime Minister of the day, Lord Palmerston, 2 of these were built. They were built originally for the Crimean War, of course, but I'm afraid they were finished after the war was over. Basically, this is a 36-inch mortar, the biggest ever built in the world. It fires a 1-ton charge over a range of about a mile. But the great point about this is that it represented a new concept in warfare, in that some 85 years before Barnes-Wallis thought of it, the earthquake principle was applied. In other words, it could fire a large explosive round which would bury itself in the earth and then go off. Another point, this thing was made up with a series of chase rings, and I'd like to show this to you. This bottom piece is a casting, and of course ended there, and was the largest part of the weapon in weight. That weighed 11 tons. Then each of these chase rings, which are held together by these longitudinal bolts, were lighter in weight than this, so each part could of course become a bullock cart load, and the thing was reasonably mobile. It could fire about 1 round an hour. It was loaded by sheer legs. The chamber here held about 60 pounds to 80 pounds explosive, and that is it. A round, in fact, is over here, if you'd like to see one in detail.
It's enormous, isn't it?
Well, this is a thin-walled iron casting. The charge inside weighed roughly a ton. This hole here is the fuse hole, which had a termite-type composition in it, which was ignited at the moment the round left the muzzle of the bore. And, of course, the length of this fuse governed the time, both the flight of the projectile and how much it went into the ground before it exploded. The Being a mortar, the trajectory was very high, so of course the round went right up in the air, down, buried itself deeply in the ground, and then in due course this ignited the charge inside, and away it all went.
Well, this is Mallet's mortar, which was fired right across the common. And standing here as it does, opposite the Royal Artillery Barracks, it's a link between the arsenal down by the river and the army up on the hill.
Left, right, down.
The artillery was the first to move up to the common, and they remained in occupation. But throughout the 19th century, many other regiments of the army were stationed here. Hospitals, stables and barracks were built round the common and down into the town. Most of these buildings are now coming down, but nevertheless, there's still enough left of Victorian detail in stone and in ironwork to make Woolwich a most interesting hunting ground. We've chosen Woolwich because only the locals know it really well and realise how far its history as both an arsenal and garrison town has stamped a special character on the locality. There's plenty more for even residents of Woolwich to find out about their own home area. Fortunately, London is still often a collection of hamlets, and each one has its own individual qualities and will certainly repay a closer look. For the present, we'll have strong roots in the past.